The hospital corridor reeked of antiseptic and desperation. A sterile purgatory where hope clung to life by a thread. Elliot Carter, a 28-year-old nurse, moved through it with the grace of someone who'd seen too much but still believed in miracles. Tonight, though, the whispers stung sharper than usual. Mocking snickers from colleagues who thought his gentle voice and unapologetic openness about his identity made him less of a man. Elliot adjusted his scrubs, his dark skin catching the harsh fluorescent light as he pushed open the door to room 312. Inside, Henry Whitaker, an 82-year-old billionaire with a failing heart, lay propped up in bed, his piercing gray eyes scanning Elliot like a man searching for something he'd lost decades ago. Henry wasn't just any patient. He was a titan of finance, the kind of name that adorned skyscrapers and charity galas. Yet here he was, frail, alone, and oddly fixated on the nurse everyone else dismissed. "You're late," Henry rasped, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Only because Dr. Grayson decided my charting needed a lecture," Elliot replied, his voice steady but warm, like honey over gravel. He checked Henry's foredrip with practiced ease, ignoring the old man's scrutiny. "They laugh at you, don't they?" Henry's question was blunt, cutting through the hum of medical equipment. Elliot froze, his fingers hovering over the chart. He'd heard worse. Slurs hissed in break rooms, patients refusing his care because of who he loved. But Henry's tone wasn't cruel. It was curious, almost protective. Elliot forced a smile. "They laugh until they need me to save their patients." He met Henry's gaze, unflinching. "Then they're real quiet." Henry chuckled, a dry, wheezing sound. "Good. Let 'em choke on their ignorance." He leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago." Elliot didn't press. He'd learned early that patients like Henry carried stories heavier than their charts. Instead, he adjusted the oxygen mask and offered a quiet, "Get some rest, Mr. Whitaker." As he turned to leave, Henry's hand shot out, frail but firm, grabbing his wrist. "Call me Henry," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "And stay a minute. I don't get much real talk these days." Something in Elliot softened. He pulled up a chair, settling in beside the bed. Henry began to talk. Not about his empire or his wealth, but about a life lived in shadows, of a love he'd buried under ambition and fear. A man named Thomas, a painter, lost to time and societal pressure. Elliot listened, his heart aching with recognition. He knew what it was to hide, to love in secret, to carry the weight of a world that didn't always understand. As the nights passed, room 312 became a sanctuary. Henry's stories wove a tapestry of regret and defiance, and Elliot shared his own. His childhood in Harlem, his coming out at 17, the boyfriend who'd left when the world got too loud. Julian, the artist with a laugh like summer and a heart too wild for commitment. Henry listened, his eyes bright with something Elliot couldn't name. One night, Henry handed Elliot a worn photograph. It showed a younger Henry, stern-faced, beside a man with paint-stained hands and a radiant smile. "Thomas," Henry whispered. "He'd have liked you." Elliot's throat tightened. "Sounds like he was special." "He was." Henry's voice cracked. "I was a coward back then. Don't you be." The words lingered, heavy with warning and wisdom. Elliot didn't know it yet, but Henry was planting seeds for a future neither of them could fully see. Outside the hospital, New York buzzed with its relentless energy. Elliot's tiny apartment in Brooklyn was a world away from Henry's penthouse life, but it was home. That evening, he found a voicemail from Julian Voss, the 32-year-old artist who'd once been his everything. Elliot, I saw your name in the hospital directory. I'm in town. Can we talk? Elliot's heart lurched. Julian, with his messy blonde hair and paint-splattered jeans, had walked out 2 years ago, chasing a dream in Paris. Now he was back, and the timing felt like a cosmic joke. Elliot didn't call back. Not yet. At work, the whispers grew louder. A new nurse, Clara, cornered him in the break room. "You're wasting your time with that old man," she sneered. "He's just a rich geezer stringing you along for attention." Her words were a knife, but Elliot's reply was sharper. "Jealousy's a bad look, Clara. Maybe try caring about your patients instead of my life." She stormed off, but the doubt crept in. Was Henry just lonely? Was Elliot reading too much into their talks? He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on his rounds, but Henry's condition was worsening. The doctors gave him weeks, maybe days. One evening, Henry called Elliot to his side, his voice barely a whisper. "I've made arrangements," he said, handing Elliot a sealed envelope. "Don't open it now. Promise me you'll wait." Elliot nodded, confused but obedient. The envelope felt heavy, like it carried more than paper. "What's this about, Henry?" "Trust," Henry said simply. "You've earned it." That night, Elliot sat on his fire escape, the envelope unopened in his lap. The city skyline glittered, indifferent to his turmoil. Julian's voicemail played on loop in his mind. He wanted to call, to scream, to ask why Julian had left and why he dared to come back. But Henry's words, "Don't you be a coward," echoed louder. The next day, Henry's monitors flatlined. Elliot was there, holding his hand as the billionaire slipped away. The hospital mourned a donor, but Elliot mourned a friend. He tucked the envelope into his bag, unaware that it held the key to a future that would upend everything. Elliot stood in the hospital parking lot, the envelope burning a hole in his pocket. The air was crisp, October's chill biting through his thin jacket, but he barely noticed. Henry's death had left a void, not just in room 312 but in Elliot's chest, where grief and unanswered questions tangled like ivy. He hadn't opened the envelope. Not yet. Henry's request felt sacred, a final act of trust he couldn't betray. But the weight of it was unbearable, a mystery that gnawed at him as he walked to the subway. His phone buzzed, another text from Julian. "I'm at the Blue Moon Cafe. Please, L. Just 5 minutes." Elliot's thumb hovered over the screen, torn between anger and the ache of old love. The Blue Moon was a cozy spot in Greenwich Village, all mismatched chairs and fairy lights. Julian sat by the window, his scarf loose around his neck, a sketchbook open on the table. At 32, he looked both older and unchanged. Same sharp jawline, same restless energy. His blue eyes lit up when he saw Elliot, but the warmth didn't reach Elliot's heart. "You look good," Julian said, his voice soft, almost cautious. "You look like you never left," Elliot shot back, sliding into the chair opposite. "What do you want, Julian?" Julian flinched but didn't look away. "I messed up. Paris was everything I thought I wanted, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. I'm sorry." Elliot's laugh was bitter. Sorry doesn't erase 2 years of silence. He leaned forward, his voice low. "You left me to deal with this city, this job, these people who treat me like a punchline. And now you're back because you're sorry." Julian's hands twisted around his coffee mug. "I know I hurt you, but I'm here now and I want to make it right. I'm showing at a gallery in Soho next week. I'd love for you to come." Elliot wanted to say no, to walk away and leave Julian in the past. But those blue eyes, The ones that had once painted his world in color held him captive. "I'll think about it," he said finally, standing. "Don't call me again unless I call first." Back at his apartment, Elliot sat on the couch, the envelope now on the coffee table. He couldn't shake Julian's face or Henry's last words. Trust. He tore open the envelope, unable to wait any longer. Inside was a letter handwritten in Henry's shaky script, and a key with a tag that read Whitaker Tower, Penthouse. The letter was brief but staggering. "Elliot, you gave me dignity when I had none. My empire, Whitaker Global, is yours. The board will fight you, my family will hate you, but you're the only one I trust to carry it forward. The key unlocks my private files. Use them wisely. Henry." Elliot reread it, his pulse racing. Whitaker Global was a banking behemoth, worth billions, with branches in every major city. This had to be a mistake. He was a nurse, not a CEO. Yet the key in his hand was real, cold, and impossibly heavy. The next morning, he went to Whitaker Tower, a gleaming monolith in Manhattan's financial district. The receptionist, a sharp-eyed woman named Marissa, raised an eyebrow at his scrubs. "Can I help you?" "I'm here about Henry Whitaker," Elliot said, holding up the key. Her expression shifted from skepticism to unease as she directed him to the penthouse elevator. The penthouse was a museum of wealth, marble floors, modern art, a view that swallowed the city whole. A safe was built into the wall and the key fit perfectly. Inside were documents, financial records, contracts, and a will naming Elliot as Henry's sole heir. There was also a USB drive labeled for Elliot. He plugged it into Henry's laptop, password protected but unlocked with a code from the letter. Thomas 1958. A video began to play. Henry, frail but resolute, sat at his desk. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he said. "Elliot, you're not just inheriting money. You're inheriting a fight. My board, my family, they'll come for you, but you're stronger than they know. Don't let them break you." Elliot's hands shook as he closed the laptop. This wasn't just wealth. It was a war. He wasn't ready, but Henry had believed he was. He thought of the hospital, the colleagues who mocked him, the patients who judged him. He thought of Julian, who'd left him to face it alone. And he thought of Henry, who'd seen something in him no one else had. The hospital was chaos when he returned for his shift. News of Henry's will had leaked, and the whispers had turned to stares. Clara cornered him again, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're some kind of Cinderella? That money's not yours. You'll crash and burn." Elliot met her gaze, his voice steady. "Keep talking, Clara. It's the only thing you're good at." But doubt crept in as he worked. The board would fight. Henry's estranged daughter, Victoria, a corporate shark, would destroy him. And Julian, could he trust him? Or was he just another complication? That night, Elliot went to Julian's gallery show. The space was packed, the art vibrant and raw, each canvas screaming with emotion. Julian spotted him and crossed the room, his smile hesitant. "You came." "I'm here for the art," Elliot said, but his eyes lingered on Julian. One painting caught his attention, a portrait of a black man in scrubs, his face soft with compassion. It was him. "I painted it in Paris," Julian admitted. "I couldn't forget you." Elliot's heart twisted. He wanted to believe Julian, to fall back into the warmth of what they'd had. But Henry's words echoed, "Don't be a coward." He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Henry's trust, for every person who'd ever been laughed at and dismissed. "I need time," Elliot said, stepping back. "Don't push me, Julian." As he left the gallery, the city lights blurred through unshed tears. The weight of Henry's legacy pressed down, but so did a spark of defiance. They could laugh all they wanted. He'd show them what he was made of. Elliot stood in the boardroom of Whitaker Tower, a glass-walled arena where power was wielded like a blade. At 28, he was out of place among the suits. Men and women twice his age, their eyes cold with calculation. Victoria Whitaker, Henry's 45-year-old daughter, sat at the head of the table, her blonde hair pulled tight, her smile a razor's edge. She hadn't spoken yet, but her presence was a storm waiting to break. The board meeting had been called to discuss the transition after Henry's death. Elliot clutched the folder of documents from the penthouse safe, his only armor against the room's hostility. He'd spent the weekend poring over them, deciphering financial jargon with the same focus he used to read patient charts. Henry's will was airtight, but that didn't mean they'd accept it. "Mr. Carter," Victoria began, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as glass. "You must understand our surprise. My father was a brilliant man, but his final decisions raise questions. You're a nurse, not a financier. What qualifies you to lead Whitaker Global?" Elliot's jaw tightened. He'd expected this, prepared for it, but the condescension still stung. "Henry trusted me," he said, his voice steady. "He left clear instructions. I'm here to honor them." A murmur rippled through the room. A gray-haired man, Richard Holt, the CFO, leaned forward. "Trust is one thing. Competence is another. This company employs thousands. One misstep could ruin us." Elliot opened the folder, pulling out a document Henry had labeled Strategic Vision. Henry outlined his plans for the company's future: sustainability, ethical investments, community programs. He believed I could execute them. "Can any of you say the same?" Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You're holding papers you barely understand. My father was ill, possibly coerced. We'll contest the will." The threat hung heavy, but Elliot didn't flinch. "Contest it. The courts will see Henry's video, his signature, his clarity. You'll lose." The room fell silent. Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her knuckles whitened. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like Elliot, a black, gay nurse from Harlem who'd never set foot in their world. After the meeting, Elliot escaped to the penthouse, his head spinning. The USB drive held more than Henry's video. It contained emails, memos, even recordings of board members plotting to undermine Henry's progressive ideas. They'd wanted to keep Whitaker Global a profit-churning machine, not a force for good. Henry had chosen Elliot because he was an outsider, untainted by their greed. But the pressure was crushing. Elliot wasn't just fighting for a company. He was fighting for Henry's legacy, for his own worth. He thought of Julian, who'd texted again, asking to meet. Elliot hadn't responded. Trust was a fragile thing, and Julian had broken it once. That evening, Elliot found himself at Central Park, needing air, needing peace. The autumn leaves crunched under his feet as he walked to a familiar bench, the one where he and Julian had spent countless evenings 2 years ago. He sat, the cold wood grounding him, and let his mind drift to Henry's stories of Thomas, to Julian's painting, to the empire now resting on his shoulders. Footsteps broke his thoughts. Julian stood there, scarf loose, hands in his pockets. "I figured you'd be here," he said softly. "You always came here when you were stressed." Elliot's chest tightened. "What do you want, Julian?" "To help," Julian said, sitting beside him. "I know I hurt you, but I see what you're carrying now. You don't have to do it alone." Elliot wanted to push him away, to protect the walls he'd built. But Julian's presence was a warmth he hadn't felt in years. I'm in over my head, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. This company, these people, they're going to destroy me. Julian's hand brushed his, tentative but firm. They won't. You're stronger than they know. And I'm not going anywhere this time. The words were a lifeline, but Elliot wasn't ready to grab it. He stood, shoving his hands in his pockets. I need to do this on my own first. Don't follow me. Julian nodded, his eyes heavy with understanding. I'll be here when you're ready. Back at the hospital, the rumors had spread like wildfire. Colleagues who'd once mocked Elliot now watched him with a mix of envy and suspicion. Clara was the worst, spreading gossip that he'd manipulated Henry for the inheritance. Elliot ignored her, focusing on his patients, but the isolation was suffocating. Then came the first real blow. A lawyer representing Victoria contacted him, claiming they'd found irregularities in Henry's will. They were suing to freeze Whittaker Global's assets, locking Elliot out of the company's accounts. The news hit the press, and headlines screamed, "Gay nurse inherits billions. Fraud or fairy tale?" Elliot's phone buzzed with notifications, but one stood out. A message from Marissa, the receptionist at Whittaker Tower. Check the USB. There's a file labeled Insurance. Henry knew they'd come for you. Heart pounding, Elliot returned to the penthouse and opened the file. It was a bombshell. Recordings of Victoria and Richard discussing how to discredit Henry's mental state, how to bribe witnesses, how to bury Elliot. Henry had anticipated their betrayal and armed him with proof. Elliot didn't sleep that night. He drafted an email to a trusted journalist, attaching the recordings. If Victoria wanted a war, he'd fight dirty too. But as he hit send, doubt crept in. Was he becoming like them? Was this what Henry wanted? The next morning, Julian showed up at his apartment, uninvited but bearing coffee and a quiet strength. I saw the news, he said. You don't have to face this alone. Elliot looked at him, the man who'd once broken his heart, and felt the walls crack. Stay, he said finally, but don't make me regret it. Julian's smile was small but real. I won't. As they sat together, planning the next steps, Elliot felt a flicker of hope. The fight was far from over, but for the first time he wasn't alone. The journalist's article hit like a thunderclap. By noon, every major outlet was running the story. Whittaker Heir exposes corporate conspiracy. The recordings from Henry's USB drive laid bare Victoria's and Richard's schemes, their voices dripping with arrogance as they plotted to discredit Elliot. Social media erupted, some calling Elliot a hero, others a schemer who'd somehow conned a dying man. The truth didn't matter to the mob. The noise did. Elliot sat in his Brooklyn apartment, the TV muted but flashing his face across the screen. Julian was beside him, sketching absent-mindedly on a napkin, his presence a quiet anchor. At 32, Julian had a way of making chaos feel manageable, but Elliot couldn't shake the fear that this was only the beginning. I didn't sign up for this, Elliot said, his voice raw. I just wanted to help people, not fight a war. Julian set down his pencil, his blue eyes steady. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone who's ever been underestimated. Henry saw that in you. Elliot wanted to believe him, but the weight of Whittaker Global was crushing. The board had suspended operations pending the lawsuit, and Victoria was rallying her allies, painting herself as the wronged heiress. Elliot needed to act fast, but he was still learning the rules of a game he'd never played. Marissa, the receptionist-turned-ally, met him at Whittaker Tower the next day. She'd worked for Henry for 20 years and knew the company's underbelly. Henry kept a second set of files, she whispered. handing him a flash drive. Offshore accounts, hidden deals, the board's dirty secrets. Use it carefully. Elliot spent hours combing through the data. It was a goldmine. Evidence of tax evasion, insider trading, even bribes to foreign officials. Henry had been meticulous, documenting every misstep his board had taken. But using it meant crossing a line. Blackmail wasn't justice, and Elliot wasn't sure he could stomach it. He called a meeting with the board, this time on his terms. The same glass-walled room felt different now, charged with his newfound leverage. Victoria sat across from him, her composure fraying. "What do you want, Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice icy. "Resign," Elliot said bluntly. "You and Richard. Step down, or the world sees what's on this drive." Richard's face paled, but Victoria laughed. A cold, brittle sound. "You're bluffing. You're a nurse, not a gangster." Elliot leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "I'm a nurse who learned to survive. Henry taught me that. Test me, and you'll lose everything." The room was silent. For the first time, Elliot saw fear in Victoria's eyes. She didn't resign, but she agreed to a temporary truce, giving Elliot access to the company's operations. It was a small victory, but it bought him time. Outside the corporate battlefield, Elliot's personal life was no less turbulent. Julian had been staying over more often, cooking terrible pasta and filling the apartment with half-finished sketches. Their connection was fragile, rebuilding on the ruins of old trust, but every touch, every shared laugh, felt like a step towards something real. One night, under the glow of a single lamp, Julian pulled Elliot close. "I'm not leaving again," he whispered. "I love you, El. I always have." Elliot's heart stuttered. He wanted to say it back, to let go of the past, but fear held him back. "Prove it," he said instead, his voice soft but firm. "Stay through this mess." Julian nodded, his hand lingering on Elliot's cheek. "I will." The next blow came swiftly. Victoria's lawyers filed a new motion, claiming Elliot had forged the recordings. The accusation was baseless, but it reignited the media frenzy. Protesters gathered outside Whitaker Tower, some supporting Elliot, others demanding his arrest. The hospital wasn't safe either. Clara and her clique spread rumors that he'd neglected patients to chase Henry's fortune. Elliot's breaking point came during a late shift. A patient, an elderly woman with kind eyes, refused his care. "I don't want you," she said, her voice trembling with prejudice. "I read the news." He walked out of her room, hands shaking, and found refuge in the hospital chapel. It was empty, the stained glass casting soft colors across the pews. He sank to his knees, not praying but searching for strength. Henry's voice echoed in his mind. "You're stronger than they know." Julian found him there, slipping into the pew beside him. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said, his voice steady. "Let me help." Elliot looked at him, the man who'd once left but was now here, unwavering. "Okay," he said finally, "but if you break my heart again, I'm done." Julian's smile was small but fierce. "Deal." Together they devised a plan. Elliot would release a public statement, not through the press but on social media, telling his story. His life as a nurse, his bond with Henry, his fight for a legacy that could do good. Julian helped craft it, his artist's eye ensuring every word hit like a brushstroke. They posted it from Elliot's account, a raw, unfiltered video of him in scrubs, speaking from the heart. The response was overwhelming. Thousands shared it, from nurses to activists to strangers who saw themselves in his struggle. Hashtags like Stand With Elliot trended, and donations poured in for a legal fund. But Victoria wasn't done. She leaked a doctored email, claiming Elliot had blackmailed Henry. The lie spread fast, and Elliot's fragile victory began to crack. Marissa came through again, slipping him a recording of Victoria admitting to the forgery. It was enough to turn the tide, but Elliot hesitated. Using it meant sinking to her level, and he wasn't sure he could live with that. As he sat with Julian on their park bench, the city humming around them, Elliot made a choice. He'd fight, but he'd do it his way, clean, honest, and true to the man Henry believed he was. The courtroom was a crucible, its oak-paneled walls closing in as Elliot sat at the defendant's table. Victoria's lawsuit had escalated to a public trial, her team painting him as an opportunist who'd preyed on a dying man. At 28, Elliot felt the weight of every eye in the room. Judge, jury, reporters, judging not just his actions but his identity. Julian sat in the gallery, his sketchbook closed, his presence a quiet promise. Elliot's lawyer, a sharp woman named Lena who'd taken his case pro bono after seeing his video, presented Henry's will and the USB recordings. The evidence was damning, but Victoria's team was relentless, twisting every fact to fit their narrative. She took the stand, her voice trembling with practiced grief. "My father was vulnerable," she said. "This man exploited him." Elliot's turn came. He stood, his scrubs traded for a suit that felt like armor, and spoke. "I'm a nurse. I've spent my life caring for people, not chasing money. Henry Whitaker saw me when no one else did. He trusted me with his legacy, not because I asked, but because he believed I could make it mean something." The jury listened, their faces unreadable. Lena played Henry's video, his frail voice filling the courtroom. "Elliot Carter is the only one I trust," Henry said, his eyes fierce even through the screen. "He's not just a nurse. He's a man of integrity." The trial stretched on, each day a battle of words and wills. Outside, protesters clashed, some holding signs reading justice for Elliot, others screaming thief. Social media amplified every moment, turning Elliot into a symbol for some and a villain for others. Through it all, Julian was there, cooking late-night dinners, sketching to ease the tension, proving his promise to stay. The turning point came when Marissa testified. She revealed Henry's secret meetings with Elliot, his clarity of mind, his deliberate choice to bypass his family. She played the recording of Victoria admitting to the forged email, and the courtroom gasped. Victoria's composure cracked, her eyes darting to her lawyer. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the foreman's voice was steady. "We find in favor of Elliot Carter." The room erupted, cheers and jeers colliding. Victoria stormed out, her empire crumbling. Elliot exhaled, the weight lifting but not gone. Whitaker Global was his, but the victory was bittersweet. The board resigned, replaced by a team Elliot handpicked, diverse, ethical, aligned with Henry's vision. He redirected profits to healthcare initiatives, scholarships, and community programs, honoring the man who'd changed his life. The headlines shifted. Nurse turned CEO redefines corporate power. Elliot's personal life was slower to heal. He and Julian moved cautiously, rebuilding trust one moment at a time. One evening, on their Central Park bench, Elliot finally said it. "I love you, Julian, but I need you to keep showing up." Julian's smile was radiant. "Every day, Elle. Every damn day." Months later, Elliot stood at a gala for the Whitaker Foundation, a new nonprofit funding underserved hospitals. He wore a tailored suit, but his nurse's heart still beat strong. The room was filled with allies. Marissa, Lena, even former colleagues who'd apologized for their cruelty. Clara wasn't among them. She'd left the hospital, her venom no match for Elliot's rise. Julian was there, his latest painting unveiled as the gala's centerpiece. A vibrant mural of a nurse holding a patient's hand, colors swirling with hope and resilience. "It's you," Julian whispered, his hand finding Elliot's. "It's always been you." Elliot looked out at the crowd, at the city beyond, and felt Henry's presence. The man who'd loved in secret, who'd lost Thomas to fear, had given Elliot a chance to live boldly. He'd faced laughter, hate, and a corporate empire, and he'd won. Not just wealth, but a legacy of love and justice. As the gala wound down, Elliot and Julian slipped outside, the night air cool against their skin. They walked through Central Park, pausing at their bench. The stone plaque, now a quiet landmark, still read "Love defies all odds." Elliot traced the words with his finger, his heart full. "They laughed at me," he said softly, "but I'm still here." Julian pulled him close, their breaths mingling in the autumn chill. "And you're not alone." The city hummed around them, vibrant and alive, but in that moment, it was just the two of them, their love a beacon against the odds. Henry's empire was Elliot's now, but so was his truth, his strength, and the man beside him. They'd laughed at the gay nurse, but he'd built something they could never take away.